Well, hi again, and back with exploring the world's special places, the Sensory Arts and Sciences series from Templates for Change. And we're still in part one, and that's the hidden story. And we're now going to look at the next part of the hidden story, which is all about waiting. And that's me, John, back again. And we're continuing, aren't we, with the series about the many extraordinary places in our world and how to discover what's not obvious or explained in the guidebooks and how to use our sensory abilities to open these places up. Now, in the first part, we realized that we invariably are going to swell and magnify our ideas and expectations in several ways. And we're now going to look at how waiting the right way, can put us in tune with the real magic of the place we're visiting. And again, we're going to use photographs taken by myself in my own explorations, which I'll mention as we go through. So now we're going to look at waiting. It is so important for us to use our waiting skills before we start to explore a place. Because what waiting does, it starts to shrink our expectations and our ideas and our preconceived views and thoughts about the place and what we may find there. And it alters our state. It kind of changes our polarity from being kind of pointed investigation, you might say, to being receptive investigation. We're putting ourselves into a receptive state so that we may tune into the frequency of the place we're visiting and the special things that were there, the humans that were once there, and what it and they may have for us today. And waiting is one of the most powerful, important and useful things that enables us to change that state and to be able to do that. Because you see, we may actually be trying to connect to micro signals from human activity that went on there that could be hundreds or even thousands of years old. For example, here is a really beautiful Aboriginal rock art painting at a sacred place in Ku-ring-gai National Park in Sydney. Now, this is over 7,000 years old, possibly. It may have been reworked because that's how Aboriginals would update their site at their own time. They would rework the outline, but the original could have been over 7,000 years old, which is an extraordinary thing. And that's the kind of thing we're trying to connect to, and the people that were there. Because there were people there at that time on those rocks, making those marks personally in the same space as we are, where we're standing there looking at them and being there. Now, just to put in a bit of science at this point, in terms of altering our state and how waiting helps us do that, because we actually know that now that our brain has two modes and two hemispheres. One, the left, is slower and more linear and practical. The other, the right, is, you might say, super fast and much more connected to other lives and senses and time, you might say. And it takes time. Waiting is very useful at this, to switch from one to the other. Now here's a quote from a famous scientist, Erwin Laszlo, who's written extensively on these kinds of things. And I'll just read this out. The brain, it seems, has two distinct modes. One is the classical mode, slow, linear, and capable of handling only a limited amount of information. The other is quantum processing mode, extremely rapid, parallel. Normally, it operates outside conscious awareness. It becomes evident only when the left hemisphere does not dominate. And so it is that when we go into a waiting mode in the right way, we can help to switch ourselves from one mode to the other mode, to a more sensitive, connected mode. Now, where we wait is also going to be very important. And one of the features of this is it's always best to try and find a place of the most human activity and generation, because it's going to be easier to connect to the place at that point where people have been and people have been active, because all these places we're looking at, the people who built them have been critical to the fact of how they've been built and why they've been placed where they are. Now, exits and entrances are always very good, or you might find a seat at a special place or a place of religious ceremony, somewhere to stand near a point where people have seen to be a very important religious place. Now, for example, here is a picture of the site of the burning bush, the traditional site of the burning bush, in St. Catherine's Monastery in Sinai. And again, that's a place with a great focus that people have had over hundreds of years. So here you need, when you're waiting, to choose a place that you're attracted to. That's very important. Somewhere you feel really comfortable and where you can see there might have been much human activity. And do your waiting there. Find a place to stand or sit or in any way that's comfortable for you. Now, the next part of waiting is, you might think, a bit of a strange one, because we're saying here, don't plan your own trip and route. And well, why on earth would we say that? Well, when we visit places, there's quite often maps or particular ways or routes that we're encouraged to take. And quite often these are helpful, they're not unhelpful at all. They will take us through a place, through the history of the earlier parts to the later parts or whatever. But here we're trying to discover something special, unusual, or not normally in the guidebooks. So while being obviously courteous to those particular routes that are set out and not causing any difficulty for others, we're actually going to want to not plan our own route before we start. What we're going to do is we're going to see if the place has something special in store for us. It's going to show us something special that might well be off the guide tracks, you might say. Now, here's a classic example from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This is not on one of the guided tours, I can assure you, but I know the Egyptian Museum very well. I've crawled all over it and I love it. It's a wonderful place. I'm fascinated with ancient Egypt, incidentally. And this is a most amazing, exquisite, fragile bowl from the very earliest times of Egypt, an extraordinary technology which nobody can really explain, not only how they did it, but why they did it, because it's inexplicably carved from a very, very delicate and flaky schist, which is very, very difficult to carve in this way, even today. And it's quite exquisite, it's quite beautiful, it's quite mysterious, and it's well off the tourist track. But something may take you to it, just as it took me to it, to take this photograph when I visited. That's what I'm talking about. Now, the next part of waiting is to have a particular state of mind. And it's this kind of state of mind. Now, when we visit somebody, we don't kind of set off round their house, do we? Inspecting rooms and cupboards and opening drawers and having a look around it. We don't do that. We're most inclined to show politeness, and of course we know if we do, most folk would love to show us around if we show interest in their place and what they're doing. They'll love to show us about. And so it can be when you visit anywhere. So if you have an interest and a willingness, you might say with a behaviour as a guest, and the expectancy and expectation and hope that you're going to be shown around, then you may just find, you might say, the living story will start to show you around too, and give you ideas of places to go and things to look at. And this is a picture taken in the Chinese opera in Singapore, but I thought was a rather lovely kind of traditional greeting posture and bow. I don't think you're expected to do that, but it's a lovely traditional Chinese picture here. So, there we are with waiting. Hope you enjoyed this today, and as I said, I'll be back soon with the next part. And again, if you want to explore more TFC presentations, just have a look at www.templatesforchange.org and see what we have there that might also interest you. Okay, I'll be back soon. Bye now.